Good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin shortly, but before we begin this absolutely incredible program, I'd like to take a moment and to Leah and Nicola, who are our phenomenal translators that are helping us today.
Muy buenas tardes. Vamos a comenzar pronto. Antes de comenzar este maravilloso programa, vamos a dar la palabra a nuestros intérpretes, Lía y Nicola, quienes nos van a ayudar esta tarde. Entonces, hola, muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Lía y estoy aquí con mi compañera Nicola y vamos a ser sus intérpretes entre inglés y español el día de hoy.
Hey everybody, my name is Leah and I'm with my colleague Nicola. We are going to be your interpreters for today.
Y para facilitar la interpretación vamos a usar una herramienta en Zoom que ya está activada y ya vamos a explicar cómo accederla.
In order to use interpretation during this meeting, we are going to be using a Zoom feature which has already been activated, and we'll explain in just a moment how this works.
Y entonces el panel se va a llevar a cabo en inglés, pero al final habrá oportunidad para que el público haga preguntas. Entonces, cualquier persona que no se sienta como 100% cómoda en los dos idiomas, en inglés y español, por favor, van a escoger un idioma, su idioma preferido, en un canal y van a permanecer ahí por toda la reunión.
This panel will be conducted in English, but there will be an opportunity for audience Q&A at the very end. If you don't feel 100% comfortable in both languages, English and Spanish, please pick an interpreting channel, either English and Spanish, and stay on it for the duration of the meeting.
Y si es completamente bilingüe o 100% cómodo en los dos idiomas, entonces puede dejar la interpretación apagada.
And if you are bilingual or you do feel 100% comfortable in both languages, you can just leave interpretation turned off.
Entonces, si nos acompaña por computadora, verá un icono de un mundo en la parte inferior a la derecha en la pantalla de Zoom. Es un botón que dice Interpretation o interpretación. Le da clic ahí y puede escoger inglés o español.
If you are with us, if you are joining us via computer today, what you'll see at the bottom right corner of the Zoom screen is a globe icon. You're going to want to click on that. It should be labeled interpretation, and then you can select after you've clicked on it either English or Spanish.
Y si nos acompaña por celular o tableta, es diferente el proceso. Es un botón con 3 puntitos, dice más o more. Le da clic ahí, aparece otro menú, le da clic en Language Interpretation, interpretación de idiomas. Luego escoge su idioma preferido, inglés o español, y luego finalizar o done o confirmar.
And if you are joining us today on your cell phone or tablet, what you will see instead is actually a button with 3 dots that says more. You're going to want to click on that. Another menu will pop up where there will be an option for language interpretation. Hit that, and then you can choose whatever channel you prefer, English or Spanish, and then make sure to click done or OK.
Y entonces cualquier problema que tengan, por favor, no sufran en silencio, nos avisan en el chat si es que no ven los botoncitos, si es que no escuchan a la interpretación, cualquier problema nos avisan en el chat y le podemos atender.
And please do not suffer in silence. Any issues you might be having, please, either if you can't see the button or you can't hear the interpreters, just write us in the chat and we will do our best to help you out.
Entonces ya deben de estar escogiendo sus canales. So you should be choosing your channels now. Vamos a empezar con la interpretación simultánea. We'll start with simultaneous interpreting. Y nada más entonces unos recordatorios, por favor. Una comunicación equitativa es una responsabilidad compartida entre todas nosotras. Entonces, especialmente para los panelistas y todas las personas, por favor, mantengan apagados los micrófonos cuando no estén hablando. Por favor, solo una persona debe hablar a la vez porque es imposible interpretar más de una voz. Por favor, hable claro y fuerte al micrófono o al dispositivo. Y se les pide también que hable a un paso moderado al hablar y que no se olvide de respirar entre sus ideas. Entonces, nada más, muchísimas gracias a ustedes por sus esfuerzos en construir espacios multilingües y le doy la palabra a Robina. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome again. My name is Robina Sewell. I'm the Executive Director of California Safe Schools. We're a children's environmental health and environmental justice organization that was founded 23 years ago. And I'm also very honored to be the co-coordinator, along with Cynthia Babich, of the Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network, which was formed by frontline environmental justice communities and advocates more than 16 years ago. We've been meeting monthly and have worked together on toxic tours, ground truthing projects, groundwater convenings, rulemaking at agencies and legislative issues, as well as environmental justice symposium. And this is our 7th year. We have a very dynamic partnership with regulators, academics, state, local, and federal agencies, and many, many environmental justice communities. We have a special focus, which is toward problem solving around many of these issues. And we've been working on these along with all of these organizations and communities for many decades. By applying this boots on the ground knowledge, we hope to help create a better balance, and we know it's critical to create spaces where we can all work together and explore and understand different perspectives and approaches to protecting environmental justice communities. So we want to again thank you very much for being here today, and to thank our sponsors for their support, California Air Resources Board, Cal Recycle, the Los Angeles City Attorney, South Coast Quality Air Management District, Earth Justice, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, that include Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, Supervisor Hilda Solis, and Supervisor Janice Hahn. And to all of the Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network organizations who, with open ears and a passion for justice, again, welcome you to this space. We also wanted to just take a quick moment to thank the incredible environmental justice planning team, Stephanie Lewis from DTSC, Jessica Brown and Rosa Borelli from the Los Angeles City Attorney, Mandy Bain from the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, Manuel Garcia and Christopher Curtis from the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, Crystal Love Lazard, Ryan Atencio, and Dali Reyes from the California Air Resources Board, Joe Liu from Coalition for Clean Air, Cynthia Babich and Florence Garibian from the Del Amo Action Committee, Jennifer Malone from the Los Angeles County General Counsel, Kristen McKinley from the California Environmental Protection Agency, Maria Salinas from Cal Recycle, Martha Sanchez from the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, Susana Lagudis from the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board, and California Safe Schools. And I think it's really important, you know, we all can see, we all try and be very transparent in these meetings, but you know, who is in the room today? And I can tell you that we have environmental justice advocacy groups. We have universities, we have students, consultants, enforcement regulators, water protection groups, air regulators, state and federal agencies, LA County departments and LA city representatives, and foundations and event sponsors. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Katie Butler, who will be our moderator for today's panel discussion. Katie is the Senior Health Deputy for Supervisor Janice Hahn and a dedicated health and safety champion for all. Katie, I turn this over to you.
Robina. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's really an honor to be the moderator today for today's land use panel. This is one of my favorite panels of the symposium. And we are so fortunate today to have 4 excellent panelists. And I'll start off by introducing them. I'll introduce all of our speakers. And once I introduce them, then I ask that you hold your questions until after the presentations. And I'm looking forward to a really great question and answer session after their presentations where we can have some productive dialogue and conversation on how we can empower our environmental justice communities, leaders in this space. So first, I'll start off by introducing our first panelist, Stephanie Pincetl. Stephanie Pincetl is a professor and founding director of the Center for Sustainable Communities at the UCLA Institute of the Environment. Dr. Pincetl conducts research on environmental policies and governance and is an expert in bringing together interdisciplinary teams of researchers across the biophysical and engineering sciences with social sciences together to address problems of our complex urban systems and environmental management. Her commitment is to science in the public interest and to conducting science that advances social and environmental justice. She's written extensively about California land use. She conducts research on cities, how they impact resources far and near, such as energy sources and energy distribution systems, and how such resources are used in cities, where, by whom, and to do what. She focuses on quantifying those flows, including urban generated waste, like greenhouse gases, and how institutions, regulations, and rules shape the ways and flows, the ways the flows are appropriated, and how cities are built and organized. She has created the first ever interactive energy web atlas that describes building energy use in Southern California and the San Francisco Bay Area. She has conducted extensive California Energy Commission, Strategic Growth Council, and county research on energy and sustainability. So thank you for welcoming Dr. Pincetl. I'm going to go ahead and read the other panelists' bios as well, and then we'll get to the presentations. We're also fortunate to have Cynthia Babich here, Director of Del Amo Action Committee and Coordinator. Cynthia Babich co-founded the Del Amo Action Committee in 1994 with an environmental justice focus on environmental health, community involvement, innovative remediation technologies for toxic waste, regulatory compliance with public health mandates, community relocation, and community-based land use planning. The Del Amo Action Committee's experiences are used to positively impact environmental justice policy decision-making. Cynthia's work with Del Amo Action Committee has been challenging, certainly, as well as rewarding. She sees it as the right thing to do. Social responsibility is important in her life, and she believes if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. The Del Amo Action Committee board members and many youth leaders are deeply engaged in community-rooted work. They are amazing individuals, and I know because I've worked with them, and have become strong advocates during their time with the organization. Cynthia has been married for over 35 years and lives with Frank on a small farm. We also have Florence. Join me, please, in welcoming Florence Garibian, our third panelist today. Florence has worked with the US EPA for 12 years, initially as a student intern in the technical library at the US EPA National Field Investigations Center in Denver, Colorado, as a technical information specialist for US EPA Region 9. In 1981, she accepted an assignment with the California Department of Health Services Hazardous Waste Program, where she served as the director of the Office of Public Participation and Information. She developed and conducted public participation programs for several Superfund sites in California. In 1985, she accepted a position as an inspector in the California Hazardous Waste Program's Los Angeles office. In 1996, she was appointed to serve as the Enforcement Program Branch Chief in the Los Angeles region. In her last 3 years in the Department of Toxic Substances Control, she was asked to be the Environmental Justice Program Coordinator for the department. After her retirement in 2011, she continued to work with the Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network. Currently, she is the chair of the Del Amo Action Committee. And our fourth panelist today, Jonathan Pacheco-Bell. Hi, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us. Jonathan is a regional planner in the South Bay Cities Council of Government. The COG is a joint powers authority comprised of 16 cities and the county's unincorporated communities in the South Bay. In this capacity, Jonathan works with member agencies to develop coherent South Bay housing policy that meets the goals of state accelerated housing production, while also meeting the goals of local communities. Before joining the COG, Jonathan served as a regional planner at the County of Los Angeles Department of Regional Planning and program manager at the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust. Building partnerships through authentic community engagement is at the heart of all his work. In addition to his urban planning practice, Jonathan currently serves on a community advisory council for East Los Angeles Pedestrian Plan and Florence Firestone Pedestrian Plan, facilitated by the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health. He holds a master's in urban planning from UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs. So thank you to all the panelists today. Dr. Pincetl, I'll turn it over to you to start off with the first presentation.
Thank you very much for that lovely and generous introduction. And I just want to say that one of the things that I've become extremely and increasingly cognizant of is that we are living on, we're essentially occupying native lands here in Southern California. And I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity just to acknowledge the fact that there were people who inhabited these places for many, 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 many centuries, and that we are now living on their lands, and they tended them carefully and stewarded them over the millennia. So in light of that, actually, I think the whole question of land use becomes even more poignant and more important to consider and to really engage with, because everything we do with land, how we develop land, where we live, and the infrastructure really has an enormous ripple effect on everything else, whether it's transportation or housing or air pollution or toxic exposure and so on. Land is really the place where all of these things come together in the most immediate and important way. And so what I would like to do is just remind us really probably of things that we already know very well, but are so influential that we almost forget about them. And that is first of all, land use in the United States is generally the purview of local governments. So everything we see around us has been permitted in one way or another, or planned in one way or another, and then permitted by local governments. And it's obvious, but at the same time, it's enormously important just to keep that in front of mind. But at the same time, these local governments have very little authority, except over land use. So local governments can't borrow money. They can issue bonds, but they can't actually go into debt. Local governments are often constrained in transportation policy by state or federal policy. Local governments are often constrained in energy policy because they don't have the authority to do a lot of things unless, like in LA, we have a municipal utility. So while land use is the purview of local governments, many, many, many other things are not. And so it creates this very difficult, I would say, situation for local governments, because it happens to be land use, the foundation of their one and only real revenue apart from fees, and that is taxation. So how land becomes zoned is incredibly important to revenue. The other side of that is that the way land is zoned also means who's included in that city and who, or county, and who's excluded, and exactly where they live. So land use is what gives a city its character: a dense city, a sprawled city, a welcoming city, a generous city, a city where you don't feel comfortable at all because there's no public space to gather in. That's really what land use decisions yield. And it's what drives, obviously, the population characteristics. The rise of the single family dwelling and those zones, which really came about in the 20s and 30s, were an express reaction or an expression of segregation and racism. It's where they were also a reaction against rising industrialization and transportation corridors. And so what the single family zone did was segregate people and clump different kinds of people in different places. And so the working class got to live in multiple unit buildings close to their place of work, which was largely industrial. So you can see that over time, those kinds of patterns get inscribed on the landscape, and we are still living with that today. And we're still struggling around who gets to live where, right? And what that looks like. Is it going to be dense? Is it going to be single family? Is it going to be mixed use? And what does mixed use mean today? Does it include industrial? What do we do with the existing industrial? And so forth. And all of that gets tied into revenue as well. So land use, while the one prerogative that cities really have, also then lead to consequences in the longer term about decisions that get made, and also tax revenue. So I think that one of the things that really is important to understand is that dynamic, right? We know it, but how do you unpack it? How do you examine it in order to make change? So we know that today what we've inherited is a segregated land use with systematic exposure of low-income people of color to much higher levels of pollution of all types: air, land, water, soil, creating an urban form that is not walkable, that is exclusive and extensive. But we have to also remember then that land use creates the tax revenues that cities have. And today, the other constraint that we've inherited since 1978 is Proposition 13. So Proposition 13 not only decimated property tax revenue for most cities, and most cities have not recovered from that exactly, because Proposition 13 also collects all that property tax at the state legislature. And then there's this arcane 1978 formula that redistributes the money across the state to different cities. And so what have cities done? Well, they tried to increase revenue through fees, right? fees and services. Well, that got cut off by 218, Proposition 218. So what was really left were sales tax. So why do we see now today these miles of things like car lots or retail sales centers, or all of this land that's devoted to retail sales, isolated from where people live? Well, because that provides tax revenue, and what happens around that tax revenue is a lot of fighting among the different jurisdictions to get that, and the consequence of that is lots of concessions. So while you might be able to get a whole bunch of tax revenue, you think you've created so many concessions in order to attract that tax revenue that you have less revenue than you thought you might get. So the cities are really trapped in this kind of weird box of constraints. So one of the question, for example, that comes up around green zones is that it just ends up adding another layer of complexity on this already enormously complex, jumbled up competitive jurisdiction against jurisdiction system that exists. And the fact that, say, LA has 88 independent cities that compete against one another for various services, revenues, and more creates this kind of arcane and difficult to challenge situation around the protection of public health and to ensure cities have sufficient revenues to conduct their responsibilities. No one city wants to think about merging with another city because they might lose out on their authority over their land use. But actually, if you think about it, wouldn't it make a lot more sense for the poor, disenfranchised cities of South LA to merge into one big city and maybe have an opportunity to really change things dramatically at that level? That, of course, is a very difficult idea for cities to get their heads around, and also the people, because that city now has an identity, and you have an identity as living in that city. So it's a really hard nut to crack. So just to conclude with this rather rapid run through all of these kinds of strange constraints that have built up over the past 100 years or so, I would suggest that really one of the most profound things that we need to do is to continue to try to reform Proposition 13 and at least create a split tax, because commercial and industrial properties have found a way to shelter themselves from progressive taxation increases upon sale, whereas homeowners have not. I don't know what the real estate investment trusts are going to be doing, but I bet you anything they're going to shelter themselves from any increased tax revenues as well. So we really have to begin to address taxation and urban city revenue. I would argue that cities should be able to borrow money as well, as long as they're not run in a corrupt way, but that's another hurdle. So that's one thing. I think we do need to contemplate merging small cities and getting them to be a little bit more robust so that they can actually have enough revenue altogether to begin to provide the services needed, and to really think about establishing green zones without one trading off a green zone against another one and competing around who's going to be implementing them or not implementing the green zone. And finally, we really need much stronger environmental protections and regulations embedded in the general plans. If you look at the general plan guidelines, there are 7 of them. They date from basically the 1970s. And we know that lots and lots of things have changed. CEQA is still the only tool in town, and it's weak, and it was not developed to deal with environmental issues in cities. It was really developed to try to protect open spaces from sprawl and to try to take into consideration the environmental impacts of that kind of land use. And it's inadequate, really, for the kinds of densification questions or pollution questions or questions like that within the city. We can do this, but we need to remember to pay attention to land use and not and see how land use becomes the real organizing and centralizing platform upon which we can actually move forward to address the kinds of issues that so many communities are facing today, particularly poor communities, communities of color, and places where we have plopped down all the things that we didn't want to see in the white single-family zones. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from my panel colleagues, whom I'm sure will have an enormous amount to add to my brief comments. Thanks for inviting me. I'm very thrilled and honored to be here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pincetl. And that really sets the stage for the next presentations very well. Helps us understand some of that history of land use and the constraints within which we're working. And thank you for suggesting some opportunities to navigate those. So I'll turn it over now to Cynthia Babich, the director of the Del Amo Action Committee, and to share her experiences and offer her insights. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much. First, I would just like to apologize for the delay that I have in my internet service. So if it flashes to you that I am unstable, it's only talking about my technology. So I apologize in advance. Today, I want to focus my part of the presentation on really empowering communities to take action. 27 years of service to my unincorporated LA County community, now called West Carson. And I just think that as a community group, we have been extremely patient in those 27 years, waiting and waiting for the government to fulfill its promise and the promise of protecting our communities. And there are several laws that have been enacted, Assembly Bill 617, I think the most recent, Senate Bill 1000, Senate Bill 575. There's a couple more, and I just really stopped counting because the realization is none of them are working to protect our environmental justice communities. We're still being saddled with bad land use planning, warehouses embedded in cute little quaint communities, and it's really out of control. And people in communities know the issues, they know the solutions, and it's really time for us to take action. I shared with most everybody the community vision plan that we developed. Took us about a year and a half, and we finished the first draft in 2000. And one of the things on the first page I just want to read you, which was a promise I felt was made to our community by the Board of Supervisors in December the 8th of 2015, and it was around development and implementation of equitable development tools. And they stated that the objective behind this effort was to identify strategies that could foster implementation of the general plan in a manner that allows county residents at all income levels to benefit from growth and development, encourages the preservation and production of safe and affordable housing, and reduces neighborhood health disparities, collectively defined as equitable development. And as we worked in our community over the years to try and make it a healthier place to live, and we have been working on a park for way too many years, 16 years. And as we were in the park one day and we were talking to some funders, we looked beyond the park, and here were trucking facilities and more transportation corridors. And as we waited for the promise to be fulfilled, thinking that our government was, taking the initiative to implement these strategies that they were voting in these laws, it dawned on us that things were very much out of control as we watched a very small warehouse, Farmer Brothers Coffee, which many people in the community enjoyed the smell of, turn into a giant mega warehouse. And it was pushed through, and I think I could go on about talking about government corruption. This isn't exactly what we sent this panel up for, but in recent light of some of the news that I've been watching, it really makes one ponder on what is the level playing field that we're dealing with. and we don't have one. And so in response to watching the warehouses come in and realizing that the promise was not being fulfilled and not being made, we set about to try and get a specific land use plan for our unincorporated county area, which many of these areas do not have. And basically we were told that those are really expensive, and that was pretty much the end of the subject. For our community group, Del Amo Action Committee, whenever you tell us no, that really means yes. And so that's the way we proceeded. And we started to think about what are the pathways to having a healthy community. And we started doing that capacity building. And it was not an easy lift. We had to really research the general plan. We were also told, oh, darn it, you just missed that general plan window. If only you would have inputted, then we could have included your concerns, but now you have to wait for the next general plan update. And we informed them that indeed we'd been commenting all along and just continue to be ignored. And so we understood that there was some short-term goals and some long-term goals. And I think some of my colleagues in other presentations for this symposium have really sent home the fact that these endeavors that environmental justice communities take on are long haul. It doesn't make it not worth doing, but it sets aside that feeling that if you don't win one battle, then the war is over. And the war is not over because the war has been called against the environmental justice communities, and we're rising to the to the challenge. And we're trying to do it in a productive. And so we gained that understanding, we got educated, we invited colleagues to the table. Many of them are on this call today to help us with understanding land use planning. Our community also faces the challenge of having two jurisdictions that border each other. We have a city of LA Strip and a county of LA Strip, and they do not recognize the borders of each other, and they do not plan accordingly. We were also faced with some heavy challenges with the city where they have by right zoning. And so our small little one-level Farmer Brothers coffee factory was able to be replaced easily with a monolith. And so that is something that still needs to be changed. We also then began to work with the community members, which was a whole nother level of capacity building. We actually had to start from scratch just to let them know what air pollution was, what multiple impacts were. And as we went through looking at the Florence Firestone specific plan as an example, which is what we followed this outline, it became super helpful because it wasn't rocket science. The thing that we were bringing to the table is the thing that the government pays a lot of money for, to contractors, to get in touch with the community, to really find out what their needs are. And so bringing that to the table, we thought was a great savings for the county. And we developed our plan and we waited, and we were told what a great job we did. And wow, we hadn't seen this from other community groups before, but yet here we sit with no implementation on the government part. So the government, again, has failed to deliver that promise. We are implementing it because we're in for the long haul, and we know what that we have to, make inroads, to make these changes, because as we sit and wait, more warehouses are projected from our area and more trucking facilities. And without having a specific plan in place for our communities, it's really funny. They know how to manipulate the process, and that's what they're doing. So we are being their roadblock. And it's just so frustrating to hear federal and state agencies talking about how they don't make land use decisions. Continually when we bring up our issues, because we actually have 2 Superfund sites that impact our community. And when we try to advocate for a good cleanup for them, and we talk about land use, were quickly and abruptly told they don't make land use decisions. I just want to let everybody know this is not true. The state, the federal government, they're all making land use decisions. When the federal government signs a conditional use permit to let a warehouse come into a community, that's making a land use decision, whether you want to understand it as such or not. And so what I would like to say is that there is a really great collaborative process that we're trying to mirror here with the Los Angeles Environmental Justice Organization. And it's about coming together and supporting each other and talking about these really important land use issues. For our warehouse site, you know, if you have a Superfund site on it, of course, the EPA needs to influence the decision-making of the local county. And it's the same with the Department of Toxic Substance Control. Same with the South Coast Air Quality Management District. Everybody has a seat at the table, and it's just to make the best decisions possible as we move forward. And so again, while we have waited for years and years for the promise to be fulfilled, it turns out we're the ones who are the fulfillers of the promise. And so we say with open arms, here we are, we're not stopping, we know what needs to be done. Please come and join us and let's start making some sense of it, because I really feel that the government is like a deer stuck in the headlights and they don't know which way to go. And we're dying because of it. They're not the ones getting hit by the cars, we are. So thank you so much for joining today. You're going to hear some more good insights, but this is just the beginning of a really important conversation that needs to happen. And we hope that the county could form some kind of a commission where environmental justice is a place where you come to and you get leadership from the communities that have been working for decades to make their community as safe as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you for everything you've done for your community. Your stories are certainly powerful. And now I'd like to turn it over to Florence. Florence, you're on.
Yes, thank you. What I want to talk about today is the need for building capacity in the environmental justice communities to be better able to be at the table, and at the same time, building the capacity of government organizations to accept the role of those community members and welcome their input. And I have some programs that I just want to mention, some things that I've been directly involved with. One of them is the LA County Sustainability Plan. And the work to put that plan together was tremendous. They called it on environmental justice groups, academic groups, and others to give them input on what the sustainability plan should look like. And it's grounded in co-equal values of environment, equity, and economy. Our county puts the focus on people. It envisions streets and parks that are accessible, safe, and welcoming to everyone. Air, water, and soil that are clean and healthy, affordable housing that enables residents to thrive in place. They presented the sustainability plan to the Board of Supervisors in 2019 and got unanimous approval of the plan, with an agreement that they would submit an annual report every year. I was able to look at a draft version of the report before our meeting, but the final report will be submitted to the Board of Supervisors at the end of the month. This is an opportunity to provide support to that planning and nurture it to make sure that that plan moves forward. One of the actions, expand the role of the Department of Health Services in the initial siting process and the ongoing enforcement of regulations for industrial facilities. And this is something that the Department of Public Health is working on, developing a standard operating procedure for discretionary land use review assignments in all unincorporated areas. Now we have to face the fact, as Stephanie mentioned, so many cities areas on unincorporated LA County, how do you begin to get people talking to each other? So that when you live in a community like ours, where there's LA City on one side of the street and LA County on the other, you have a way of being able to work together and make things happen. Another thing that's happening is the Green Zones program. On September 22nd, 21, after required public review, the Regional Planning Commission, again unanimously, certified the final environmental impact report for the Green Zones program and recommended adoption of the ordinance to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors hearing is scheduled for Tuesday, December 21st, 2001. Some of the things that I really like: junk, salvage, and auto dismantling scrapyards are now recategorized under recycling facilities to allow for improved regulation. The ordinance requires air filtration systems in residential units and other rooms. And I would like to say that there's a lot of things we can do to make sure that when people get an indoor air filtration system, they get the right thing that really works. Now I want to move on to the $500 million budget addition to the Department of Toxic Substances Control. And I will tell you that Cynthia has a hard time getting her mind around this and calls it 50 million. And I have a hard time getting my mind around it as well. It's to be a program that operates for 4 years to accelerate and investigate the cleanup of contaminated properties in environmental justice communities. Now, this means money going in to environmental justice communities to make them better. And here, I think it is vitally important for communities to be at the table. And I fear the way this program has been set up, that is not what is envisioned. So we don't want a program where developers come in and propose projects, possibly put on top of a contaminated property in a community, and the community is not brought to the table so that they understand and can comment on what is taking place. And I'm very, very concerned that that is something that could happen here that would not provide the benefit this program has the potential to provide. I also want to talk about the federal government. And I was very fortunate to be in a meeting where EPA's new administrator, Reagan, talked about the work that EPA wants to do in environmental justice. And we know that the budget that Biden has proposed supports our state, local, and tribal partners, increases support for national treasures like the Great Lakes and Chesapeake Bay, accelerates job-creating water infrastructure improvements, elevates environmental justice across the agency, increases support for science, and makes sure that all the EPA offices have an operational budget and workforces they need to deliver to the American people. And I am also very concerned about this because I will tell you quite frankly and openly that the US EPA that the Dalamo Action Committee is attempting to work with is unresponsive to our concerns and massively dysfunctional. And in order to get this to happen the way it needs to, the federal EPA needs to be retooled, refocused, and get back to being public servants serving the public that need their help. That is beyond doubt. That is something that is very much needed. Now, what I would like to see happen is that we begin to build bridges. And that is something that I have been doing since I retired. I see the clear need for people in the communities to have a voice, to understand the issues, to have the respect of government agencies, and a commitment to work with them in the projects that are underway. I see the environmental justice community as needing to be able to respond and have the capacity to respond. And that's a bridge that needs to be crossed. It's a lot of work. It's difficult. And the first place to start in that building bridges effort is to have the respect of the agencies that we work with. And the fewer times our issues come down to that 1 minute we get to say to the Regional Planning Commission, to the South Coast Air Quality Management District, that is not the way to work with communities. Communities should not get 1 minute to talk about their fate and their needs. There should be work groups, the Environmental Justice Commission, people that boost the abilities of people in disadvantaged communities to be able to respond, to be able to give their input, and to have the highest respect possible held on behalf of the regulatory agencies. And I hope in our second symposium that we start to talk about some of the things we might be able to do to make that happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Florence. I know all of us can hear your passion, and the call for building capacity is so important. Thank you for sharing that. Our last panelist presenter today, Jonathan Bell, former regional planning and now with the South Bay COG. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Cynthia. And definitely thank you, Florence. We're going to be building off of what you just said. Also, thank you to everybody who joined us here this afternoon. I'm very honored to share this space with you. Today, I'm representing the South Bay City's Council of Governments, but I am also a longtime partner in the community of West Carson that Florence and Cynthia and so many others here represent. Longtime partner with the Del Amo Action Committee. We're going to be talking about that partnership today, talking about how to build partnerships like that in hopes that we can inspire other planners and other folks that are in the ability to help our communities to build those type of collaborative partnerships. Part of building partnerships starts with explaining the different types of partners that are out there. So I'd like to begin by explaining what is the South Bay City's Council of Governments. A COG is a joint powers authority that serves as a regional government, a regional entity among several smaller governments that have come together to form this council. And you think about it, LA County, as we heard a moment ago with our other speaker, has 88 independent cities, but it also has the County of LA as another municipal agency. So there's basically 89 jurisdictions. We have a lot of different discussions, a lot of different unique opportunities and challenges across all those different cities. The South Bay is a unique place with very diverse demographics and geographies unto itself. The South Bay City's COG was formed in 1994 to give a voice to the South Bay region. The COG is comprised of 16 cities and LA County representing the unincorporated areas. And we're going to talk about unincorporated in a minute. The South Bay is a very diverse region. It has a variety of geographies. Think about it. Beach and coastal cities, inland cities, the peninsula. We have cities around the Port of LA. It has wonderful ethnic and cultural diversity, socioeconomic diversity, and urban, suburban, and rural characteristics. So the COG's work in the South Bay is very much like a microcosm of working in California because of this diversity across this region. And the COG is a credible third party with a stake in the region that can be a broker between a lot of the different agencies and a lot of the different communities that are in it. This is important for all y'all to know. This is potentially another partner for you to look to in our work in building partnerships. The collective vision of the COG is captured in 4 words: partnership, persuasion, performance, and advocacy. Now, we do a lot, and I'm just going to give you a very brief overview, 3 of many projects in our regional work. Home Share South Bay is a program that connects seniors who have extra living space in their homes to renters who are looking for affordable housing, thereby preventing homelessness, but also bringing people together so we can address, the companionship and bringing together people so that they're not isolated, especially our seniors in the South Bay. The South Bay Fiber Network. This is a local, affordable, high-speed broadband network for our South Bay communities. This supports our digital economy. It supports things like telework, which is one component of sustainability, getting cars off the road. And then finally, the Environmental Services Center. This is a hub for energy efficiency, water conservation, waste reduction, and the center provides a variety of resources and services to businesses and residents and governments within the South Bay. So I wanted to begin by just letting you know what I'm up to now, and I'm so happy to continue this longtime partnership in West Carson. But it certainly didn't begin there. I have been a planner in the county of Los Angeles for 15 years. And I can now say I have the experience of working in the public, in the private, and in the nonprofit sectors. And the core of my work as an urban planner is building meaningful and authentic partnerships in communities of color, especially communities that have been impacted by environmental justice concerns and issues. That started at LA County Department of Regional Planning. I see several people from regional planning are here. Great to see your names again. Shout out to you. I'm so happy that I'm back in this new role at the COG because now we get to partner again. I'm so happy to be back in this role. We can continue our work. Regional planning's community-based work is pivotal for the work I was doing before and the work they're continuing to do. So I want to give everybody a quick highlight, just kind of a three-pronged highlight of regional planning and why this department is special. Number one, Department of Regional Planning planners serve in the unincorporated areas. Let's define this. Unincorporated essentially means you're a community that's governed by the county. You're not your own city. West Carson, East LA, Florence Firestone, Altadena, so many unincorporated communities. But many of our community members don't know that they live in an unincorporated area. So as an LA County planner, especially because you're able to work on the ground, you get to demystify that concept of unincorporated and help people get to the services that they need to get to, help people understand who their actual representatives are. So they're not going to another city hall, but they're coming to the county. And you also help them understand and kind of disentangle the web of government. We talked about it today. We have local government, city and county, we have state, we have federal, and now you're aware of the Joint Powers Authority. So this is especially important for immigrant communities. This is especially important for environmental justice communities that need help and need to know where to seek out that help. The second thing I'd like to raise up about Department of Regional Planning is that the planners get to make a county-wide impact. Regional planning has jurisdiction over all the different geographies. Think about it, mountains, deserts, beaches, suburbs, urbanized areas. The unincorporated areas are vast and they cover all the different geographies and all the different scales. Sometimes unincorporated areas are only a couple blocks. And then other times they're the size of a whole city and sometimes even larger. So as a regional planner, you get to do that kind of work in this environment, working with a variety of cultures and ethnicities and working with folks from different socioeconomic strata across the county. The third point, which is really important for me to raise up, is that regional planners do the code enforcement work. This is unique. Most cities and most counties don't have planners doing enforcement. It's usually a building inspector or a code enforcement agent or sometimes retired police, right? It's typically not a planner, but regional planning is unique because planners are the ones going out there to enforce the code. That's how I met Cynthia and Florence. I and my colleagues at regional planning doing enforcement, we turned enforcement on its head. So we were going out to say, okay, I have to enforce codes, I get it, but I'm also going to build relationships while I'm out here. And I'm going to turn these tense conversations into teachable moments about urban planning. That reduces the distance between me and my constituents, and that brings people into these processes. And it gets to what Florence was talking about, building bridges, participatory planning. They're no longer afraid to talk to planners because they know who I am, because I'm always in their neighborhood. And even if I have to give them some bad news because of some code violation, we can talk it through and we can figure out solutions. That is really important for planners. If you can find ways to be out on the ground, getting to know people in their spaces, that's the beginning of building collaborative partnerships. And that brings me to my third and kind of final presentation item for today. We're talking about partnerships. We're talking about sustainability. We're talking about those two things, and I want to put those together for us. We're talking about sustainable partnerships here. How do you build sustainable partnerships? Today is the continuation of a partnership that I have with the Del Amo Action Committee in unincorporated West Carson that has spanned my work at regional planning LA County, my work at the nonprofit LA Neighborhood Land Trust. We were working together on that park, and I'll still be involved in that in my private time. And now in my role at the South Bay Cities COG. So this is an ongoing partnership that is something that anybody can do if you want to do it, if you're a planner. And I'm going to give you three takeaways as to how. Number one, you need to build relationships in the spaces of the community members. Don't always ask them to come to you. You need to go to the community. You need to find ways to get out there. Trust is the bedrock of community planning. And the planner needs to earn the trust. Don't ever assume it's going to be accorded to you. You need to earn it as a planner. It means this: you need to go to the people. You need to go to their homes, their businesses, their churches. You need to go to their bus stops, their supermarkets. You need to go to the cookouts, the barbecues, and the quinceañeras. I certainly did. And that's how I reached even more people, because I was invited, because I had earned the trust. And so many of my colleagues from the department are able to continue doing that. So this is how you know the community, and this is how they know you. When you earn that trust, you become an ally. Number two, in terms of takeaways of how to build sustainable partnerships, you have to remember that people's lives are at the heart of what we do in urban planning. So whether you're working on a ministerial approval, right, an over-the-counter approval of a patio cover in a backyard, or if you're partnering with the Del Amo Action Committee on an environmental justice element in their grassroots vision plan that they did on their own, whatever you're doing as a planner, you have to keep people's lives at the forefront of your minds. That's what we're doing. That's why we do this. So you move with intention, right? You work with intention and you move with intention, knowing that as your reality. And when you do that, you avoid the whole check this box type of approach to planning, that very insincere, extractive type of planning that was done a long time ago, and sometimes is still done today in certain spaces and places, that creates distance and dismantles those bridges that Florence is telling us that we need to build. The third takeaway is we need to elevate the respect afforded to our community members. I'm going to double down on what Florence said. They are the experts. The planner is a facilitator. The planner is a coordinator, but the community members know the community better than any planner ever will. So the planner needs to work with them to help facilitate and coordinate, but make sure that those decisions about the future of the neighborhood come from the people. And this, for everybody, is the basis for collaborative participatory planning that I've been doing for the last 15 years. And I think it can be something that you can do too. Thank you very much. I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Okay, I want to encourage everyone, all the attendees. I see a lot of familiar faces and names. Again, thanks for joining us. You can raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, or feel free to write a question in the chat so we can ask the panelists. I'll kick us off by summarizing and just talking a little bit about the challenges we heard today. We heard a lot of really serious challenges, a lot of them big ones, sometimes scary ones. I think they resonate with a lot of us, starting with Stephanie, sharing that the deep roots of the land use decisions that we make, and the history of those land use decisions yielding, these systemic environmental injustices that now we're faced with, closing those gaps and fixing. And the lack of trust in government agencies is a serious problem. Many times, it's due to what we heard, Cynthia and Florence, you really touched on, bureaucratic processes, right? Bogged down with arbitrary, cutoffs, 1-2 minutes at our community meetings. And that does not equate with what Jonathan is advising, let's really elevate and respect that community voice. So needing fixes in those government processes. This, issue of, our web of government can be so complex and difficult to navigate. And other challenges were touched on. So I want to start off by asking the panelists, how did you navigate these roadblocks in the work that you've done? And, if you could just share a little bit of, maybe you had to pivot and change a strategy, or how did, in many of the work, that you did, you had to move past these roadblocks. Can you share a little bit more with us on that? And I don't know who wants to go first. Feel free to chime in.
I can jump in there. So I think one of the things that environmental justice communities really have in their bag of tools is the ability to be flexible. In this world that we live in, certainly being flexible is an asset. So many things get thrown at you that we get put into a reactionary mode where we're always reacting to things that are being done to us. So that can be a roadblock unless you're prepared mentally to know and have the confidence that you have all the tools you need to make good decision making. It's not because you don't know the secret trick or you haven't made the secret connection. There can be a lot of things that can be thrown in your pathway. And so having the ability to be flexible, but having this long-term capacity in your mind so that you're ready to pick up the load and move forward, and you're not just stuck in the road because somebody has failed you. And so in our case with our vision plan, yeah, it would have been really nice if our board of supervisor at the time would have said, wow, you really did this heavy lift. Let me take it to the next step and let's start looking at these other elements like transportation and things that we probably don't have an expertise on. So we are moving forward with implementing it. And hopefully there are people that are on this call today that aren't part of our collaboration that maybe have another tool that we can add to our toolbox as we move forward. So I think, jump over the roadblocks that others put in front of you, but make sure that you're not your own roadblock. Don't be a deer stuck in the headlights. Move forward confidently. You are doing a great job.
Thank you, Cynthia. Anything to add, Florence or Jonathan?
Well, what I've done is try to do my homework for every, like I've worked with the South Coast Air Quality Management District, go to the work group meetings where you are kind of alone there, surrounded by people in the, industrial people, which isn't easy, but it's where you need to be. But I really think that if you do the homework, like try to read the documents, understand what they're saying. We just had a recent experience with EPA where we asked for monitoring of a construction site. And the first response we got from EPA was, oh, you're just exaggerating. It's really not that big of a deal. And then we pointed out to them language in the mitigated negative deck about what the company was going to actually be doing on that property. And because we'd done that homework and done it well, received an apology from EPA, which is like, wow, that never happened before. So I do think, even though it's very difficult for community members to understand technical documents, etc., I think if you just spend some time trying to get a little more knowledge about what it's about, you will find that your comments are more relevant and more acceptable to the agencies you're talking to. It's work, but it really pays off.
And if
Thank you.
thank you, Florence. If I could just jump in real quick, the difficult interaction that Florence had is exactly why I and my colleagues have tried a different approach. And to build off of Cynthia, I always satisfied my core role as a inspector planner, right? I went out there to do the job that I was required to do. So that core duty of enforcing the zoning code was always met. And I decided in that space to also go above and beyond. And I looked closely and I said, well, I don't see anything in my job description that says I can't be a resource to people. That was the impetus of something new. That was the spark. So if you're in a role that has you, especially if you're on the ground, if you have those relationships, have the audacity to try something different. That was the beginning of it for me, and I've never looked back. Also, having that proximity to West Carson and all the other neighborhoods in this community, I saw it with my own eyes, with my feet on the ground. Robina brought that up earlier, having that on the ground perspective. I saw it from their space. That's what we need to do.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate that. I do want to touch on a lot of the opportunities that our panelists talked about this afternoon. Starting with Stephanie, you mentioned reforming Prop 13, creating a split tax. You mentioned, contemplating maybe we merge smaller cities, to kind of get over some of those hurdles we're facing now. Cynthia, you raised up that idea of maybe building a more formal infrastructure for the environmental justice community in Los Angeles, whether it's through, a county commission or whatever, look or name that needs to be, so that it speaks the right language for our government agencies to appropriately acknowledge environmental justice partners and give them that appropriate seat at the table for all these decisions, prior to them being made. And, Florence, you mentioned several really huge opportunities with the sustainability plan, green zones, the $500 million addition that DTSC is getting, opportunities for environmental justice communities to steer these, and our government officials and health officials to steer these efforts in the right direction so that they benefit the residents. Going back to Jonathan's point, that intention of protecting health and lives and property, and bring that the right intention to those plans and programs, and that a lot of good opportunities you guys mentioned. So my question for you all is, how do we prioritize, what we spend our time on, right? I know a lot of us grapple with that every day, so that we can make the biggest impact, make the most positive change. Do you have any thoughts on how to prioritize these opportunities that we've been talking about today, or any other thoughts on what are those next steps?
I have a couple thoughts. I think that in thinking about a lot of the programs that we've talked about today, and Florence went over the green zones and sustainability, and we have the park bond money, and we have all these things that environmental justice communities have been watching from afar. Again, the promise, if we just patiently wait here, these great things that are on the rise will come to us. And we've talked today about the complexity of how planning started off in the 70s. I think Stephanie said, I'm sure it happened way before that, but the more formal official planning and how things have just so drastically changed. And I know in working with our community, if you are already, it's not the best decisions have been made, it's really hard to pull people out of the entrenchment and the need to just keep plowing forward no matter what. And I'm not talking about the plowing forward I was talking about earlier, where environmental justice communities are doing the needed plowing. And so thinking about the Green Zones program as an example. And I know that the city has the Clean Up Green Up program that I'm not as familiar with. But there have been areas that have been identified as needing special focus and need. And if people proactively gathered in this collaboration that I talked about earlier, where you have state, federal, local planners, air quality, you have the whole mix of people who are charged with making sure environmental justice communities are protected, and you bring them to the table proactively to talk about situations before people have made more bad land use decisions, I think that that could give us a path forward. I mean, can you imagine looking at the Green Zones program as an example and saying, wow, look at these communities that have this focus that haven't been worked with yet. And calling all the people together, which is normally what the Del Amo Action Committee has been doing. We have friends, we pick up the phone, we find people who are progressive and like-minded, and we start having conversations. And I think it's easier to have those conversations proactively than trying to do it after people have made bad decisions, because it doesn't work. That's why we have a warehouse coming into our neighborhood. It's because everything we did was everything right. All the laws were on our side. But as Stephanie talked about earlier, this machine of making money and trying to balance all these things, it's just too appealing. And if you have a corrupt politician or something like that, and I'm sure we don't have any in LA or the city, but if you have that, then everything's out the window. It really doesn't matter what play you're trying to make. And so that's where you want to have these proactive conversations. And that's why I really like this idea of an environmental justice commission, because now you have a body of community experts. Because see, now that we don't even have one yet, I'm already filling in the role of the commission, and it's with these EJ leaders. Many of us are getting older, and we have a lot of energy to put into making sure that we leave a trail, a paper trail of where we've been, so that communities, you know, can continue the fight. So proactive, collaborative conversations, and they're really not that hard to do. That would be my wishing tree wand magic.
I'd like to build on that really quickly. This is great because I get to quote a line from Hamilton. For my planners out there, talk less, listen more. Seriously, that's what we need to do. Planners are oftentimes fantastic communicators, great speakers, great writers, but communication is also listening. So this is building on Cynthia's point to be involved in these conversations and to stop talking and listen. That's how we can start prioritizing where we start with environmental justice, Katie.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, that really resonates with me. I know when I was at the health department, we would not have known about some of the community impacts if we did not hear from the community members themselves and, you know, the health symptoms they were actually experiencing, you know, and getting out there in the community and talking to people. So important. Thanks for that. And I like Cynthia, if you had a wand, that's what you would do. So just kind of building on that thought there, you know, if any of you were king or queen for the day, you know, what one change would you make, and how would you do that? I see Florence has probably a laundry list in her head she's thinking about.
Well, sometimes I sit around and I say, if I was the president, but then I say, you're not going to ever be a football coach or president, so you might as well forget it. But maybe one thing is creating more forums and more opportunities for dialogue. and make them feasible and worthwhile. I think that, that's a good idea, to just have the real forums for dialogue with planning departments, regulatory agencies. And, one of the reasons that our enforcement forums have been so successful is because we put them together. So we don't have a regulatory agency that has their own private motives for doing communication with us. We have us pulling it together and creating a safe space for dialogue. And I think that's really meritorious, really important.
Thanks, Florence. Does anyone else on our panel want to weigh in on that question? If you were king or queen for a day, what
jump in
change
real
you might
quick.
make to our systems, or yes.
Thank you. I'd like to build on Florence's point to say that we need environmental justice education from the bottom up, but also taken out of the academy. So it's not something that you get only if you go to college or university, right? We need to really take this learning about environmental justice issues as much as we can to the street level, so that we can build capacity and filter the information through our K through 12 systems, our public schools, make it multi-generational so that we have seniors involved just as much as we have kindergartners, offer workshops, do things at night and weekends, whatever it takes, and always in the languages of the people, so that this education is accessible to all.
Thank you, Jonathan. Joe, Lou, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. Wait, let me figure out how to put my hand down. There we go. Hi, Katie. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you.
I miss you. Wish we could hang out more. And thank you to all the people participating and all the great people who are listening in, man. What a fantastic group of people, including my good friend Mark Abramowitz, who I see is in here too. So I was listening to all of this, and finally kind of hit me that there are very few problems we come up against that can't be solved with a good policy or better policy. And when it comes to land use, the thing that has always pissed me off is that there are requirements, state requirements on land use, requiring general plans, now requiring environmental justice provisions, and all these other things, and with basic goal of avoiding incompatible land uses. Yet, time and again, we see exceptions made, we see problems created or exacerbated, and we see very little effort to address the existing land use problems that we come up against, which are going to take decades, if not hundreds of years to fix. So I think if I had all the power in the world for one day, I would fix the policy so that it was more enforceable, it was more easily understood by community members, that there was more accountability built in to our land use policies. And, the local governments fight against us like crazy for good reason, because they want to have all the authority and none of the accountability. But I think the only way we really fix this problem, and we have to admit that the existing problems are going to take a really, really long time to fix. But the only way we fix this is if we adopt policies that include enforceability, accountability, and real consequences for incompatible land uses. So that's my 2 cents. And thank you again for doing this.
Thank you, Joe. Really good thoughts to share with the group. I really appreciate you chiming in there. Couldn't agree more. The last question I have for the panel, before I turn it back to you, Joe, for the closing, is what does success look like? Can you give the group here your vision of what success can look like, because we don't want to miss it when we do accomplish something, and sometimes we might not see those successes along the way. I know many of you have had many successes along the way, but can you share with us what is success? What can success look like?
I'll take a stab at it. So, I think in my bio, it talks about if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so for me, success is being engaged. It's keeping the focus on the people in my community who really are depending on us to keep the ball moving forward, that don't really have the capacity to take on this whole nother job of trying to educate government agencies and the federal and state government. They're just trying to, as Jonathan touched on many times, they're just trying to live their life and survive. And so a success to me is keeping the ball moving forward. And I think the Del Amo Action Committee has done that. And if I had a wish, I know we already passed that question, but if I had a wish, it would be that everybody had to speak the truth. And when you have a conversation with somebody, you get the truth, wherever it may lay. At least you know what you're up against, and you don't have to sit there trying to figure out what kind of squirmy person is in front of you, and what's going on. So if everybody had to tell the truth, and I think the Del Amo Action Committee, as hard as it can be sometimes, is very transparent. And we don't know everything. And if you know something, we want to put that into our information bank, because to base your work on lies and misrepresentation, you're never going to have success, because you're never going to get anywhere. And so, that's what success looks like for us, having a community that still has the will to engage after everything our poor community has been through, how we've been disrespected. And yet I see many of our community members are on this call today, and bless them, because when we tell our stories, it may be very helpful to others, but it's like ripping open a wound that we have over our hearts. And we only keep telling them and moving forward because we know that's our only chance for survival. But more importantly, we want to empower other environmental justice communities so that they can see the monsters.
I think one of the most difficult things that we have is celebrating success. There have been times when we've talked about, well, when we get this done, we're going to go somewhere and have something or whatever to celebrate. And then everything moves on and you're on the next one before you even mark the success that you had. And the other thing about it is I've never heard a government agency say, the Del Amo Action Committee brought this to our attention and now we're working on it. It's always kind of like some mysterious thing happened and now they're working on it. But it's good to measure success. And when you do get that success, it's good to say, we did that and we did it well. Like Cynthia doing the health survey in our community. Do you know how amazing that is? That we got people to help us go door to door in our community and do a health survey and have success in accomplishing that. I think that is tremendous. And we need to mark that as a success. And hopefully in the other communities doing the same work. So, you do need to mark your victories, and you do need to take credit for them, and you do need to feel good about them, because that helps you meet the next challenge that is coming right in the door, right on top of it every single time. So it is good to do
Thanks,
that.
Florence. Yeah, I agree. Thank you for those wise words. And I'm apologize. I let us run over a little bit, 1 minute here. Cynthia, do you want to take back the mic and close us out here?
Sure, and I will resist the urge to talk super fast because I don't want to stress out our amazing interpreters. So I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for everybody participating, and I'm hoping that the information was useful. I think by the amount of people that remained as dinner time approaches and the end of work is a testament to the importance of this topic. I just want to kind of give a little bit of a pitch for our November panel. It will be on November the 17th in this same time slot, 3:30 to 5. And we are trying to tie these two topics loosely together. It morphs and it changes the more that we are able to discuss it, which is a good thing. But we really want to talk about how we can help move the deer out of the road. And of course, you know, my government deer metaphor is my reoccurring theme. And to have a focus on some of the things that Joe was touching on that he would do with his magic wand. And that's not having any plans that don't have a strong focus on what the implementation component is going to be. And really making sure that we look at these laws that are being put into place and seeing really what those protections are and how we can uplift them. And so the November panels will be talking about implementation plans. We're going to be talking about memorandums of understanding that are currently underway with EPA and California EPA, and we hope others would join in that same vein. And also the capacity building is going to be a key component, really touching on and going into deeper to the issues that Florence was bringing up, how communities can build their capacity for these long roads of engagement. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on next time, a lot more nuts and bolts, hopefully. So we hope that you will join us. If you are getting our invites, you're going to keep getting them for all the symposiums. The only way to get out of my clutches is to, either let me know that you're not available or that it's just way too much. We're doing way too much to follow. So otherwise, thanks again so much. And thank you, Katie. You did an amazing job. And I think the panel of people really speaks to the collaboration building that we're talking about. We never ask people to say anything other than what is in their mind and in their heart and their truth. And I think that that's how you build a good foundation for moving forward. So thank you all so much. And thank you to our interpreters for making us look so good on a multi-language basis. And I think the word is lingual, not language, but you know me, I'm still trying to comprendo.
Night, everyone.
Good night, Katie.
Be safe.
Good night. Have a good evening.